From our newsroom in New York, in color, this is the CBS Evening News, with Harry Reasoner substituting for Walter Cronkite, and Eric Severide in New York, Robert Pierpoint in Washington, Bruce Morton in Manila, Gary Shepard in Saigon, Foster Davis in Atlanta, Georgia, and Murray Fromson in Hammond, Indiana.
Good evening. Vice President Spiro Agnew has begun his goodwill tour of 10 Asian countries. His first stop was the Philippines, where his presence produced a small anti-American demonstration. We have a report by satellite from CBS News correspondent Bruce Morton in Manila.
Vice President Agnew's Asian travels began, as most diplomatic journeys do, with an airport welcome. It was traditional, none of the hard-fisted rhetoric which had blasted the bad guys back home, but words honeyed enough to soothe the most acid-stomached diplomat.
I'm in no position to make pronouncements on this part of the world, but I have done some homework before beginning this quest for understanding, and for that reason, I have already great respect for the accomplishments of the Filipino people.
The first natives were friendly, but not all with sweetness and light. Perhaps 150 demonstrators, most, it seemed, left-wing students, gathered outside the U.S. Embassy where Agnew was guest of honor at a reception. They made sure their Yankee go-home message got through. The small crowd was noisy, but not violent. A few placards did bang on Ambassador Henry Byrode's car as he came through, and once or twice firecrackers exploded in the street. The crowd was already leaving or had been chased away by the time the vice president came. But his Secret Service escorts surrounded the car and raced it through the gate like men with a Viet Cong division on their heels. The Manila police had no trouble controlling the crowd, and there were only a few scuffles. No one seemed badly hurt, though the police occasionally got angry as young girls tried to block them from arresting young men. This small demonstration was just that. Most people here are not violently anti-American, and at the reception inside, there were all the handshakes and smiles any protocol officer could have wanted. There are some issues for Vice President Agnew to discuss here, but no raging arguments.
Glory. Clean your rug this afternoon, entertain guests tonight? Oh, I cleaned my rug this afternoon and collapsed tonight. But Alice says you're great, Glory. We'll see. Just spray on the rich cleaning foam. Next, sponge it in with a wet mop. Simple. Usually dries in 2 to 4 hours. And then you vacuum. It's too easy to be good. It's good. Alice, I'm giving a party tonight.
Clean your rug this afternoon. Entertain guests tonight. Glory, the high-speed rug cleaner.
The other day I found this tile from the new floor we laid. It seemed different. That floor had yellowed. So I took off the old wax and used clear. It doesn't yellow. And you know, that floor looked like new again.
Clear. It never yellows.
In South Vietnam, a 3-day New Year's truce proclaimed by the enemy has begun. Initial reports said military action was extremely light. The Allies, as they did during the Christmas period, will continue normal operations until they begin their one-day ceasefire on New Year's Eve. The Viet Cong and North Vietnamese were accused by the Allies of committing more than 100 violations during the Christmas truce. One of them involved an enemy attack on an American patrol near Lai Cave. The only survivor was Captain John Marshall of Livonia, Michigan, and he suffered multiple wounds. He described what happened to CBS newsman Gary Shepard.
About 16:45 in the afternoon, we got ambushed along a road. A pretty well-organized ambush. A Jeep got shot up pretty bad. People in it, with the exception of myself, were killed in the initial volley. Jeep drove off the road about 50 meters, came to a stop, and at that time I got out. I still hadn't been hit, and was surrounded by 15 to 20 enemy carrying AK-47s and RPG launcher, a couple M16s. Tried to surrender, and They didn't accept my surrender. They shot me down, cut me down. 3 of them opened up on me.
They hit you in the leg?
Yeah, they cut me across the legs and one arm a little bit. About that time, a convoy and some helicopters came by, and the enemy scattered. The enemy scattered. We're gone for about 45 minutes. And when they returned, they stripped the bodies of all effects on it and took all the things out of the Jeep, weapons, and other equipment, and proceeded to stack the bodies up.
Now, what were you doing at this time?
Well, at this time I was laying on the ground next to the Jeep, and the only thing I could think to do was play dead, because I knew I couldn't outrun them or couldn't outfight them. So I figured I had about the only chance I had. After they got all the equipment and things, they took some gasoline out of the gas tank and threw it over the Jeep. Threw some over the bodies, were stacked on top of me, and lit a match to it. And then they took off. So about that time, I figured the only chance I had then was to get out from underneath the bodies and get away. Finally, next morning, I got back towards where the Jeep was and worked my way back on out to the road, trying to avoid the small lights that looked like VC were all around me there. I tried to avoid the lights that they had, and finally made it out to the road, and next morning got picked up by the sweep team that came by.
Captain, you're in a hospital bed right now on your way to Japan. When you look back on what happened to you, how do you feel?
I don't know. I'm ready to go back as soon as I get fixed up. It's my profession. It's my way of life. I'm ready to go as soon as they get me back together.
Next week in South Vietnam, a new press law goes into effect prohibiting the government from shutting down newspapers or magazines without going to court. At present, all that is required is an order from the information minister. Today, he closed or suspended 2 more Saigon newspapers and 6 magazines on various charges. Gary Shepard reports from Saigon that the Thieu regime apparently is trying to silence any publications that challenge its policies before the new law becomes operative.
Why are Kent Hundreds getting so popular? Because they taste good longer. They taste good because they're Kent. They taste good longer because they're longer. So what are you waiting for?
What a good time for a Kent.
Nice try, fella. Trying to clean your engine to help make your car last longer. You get an E for effort, but don't you understand? There's an easier way. Help clean inside your engine with mobile detergent gasoline. We clean up what most gasolines make dirty.
President Nixon concentrated today on clearing his desk of Congress's closing bills before he travels to the Western White House tomorrow. A spokesman said that Mr. Nixon will sign the mine safety bill in spite of misgivings which created fears of a veto. The White House said he also will act on the tax reform bill, another piece of legislation which went further than he wanted. Among the bills signed today was an appropriation for several government departments which forbids use of federal funds for persons engaged in certain kinds of campus disorders. The president said he is concerned about student unrest, but he doesn't think that Washington should take the role of campus policeman. He also signed the almost $5 billion housing bill. This contains a requirement that cities replace dwellings torn down in urban renewal projects. The U.S. delegation to the Strategic Arms Limitations talk with Russia reported personally to President Nixon today. Robert Pierpoint reports.
The president seemed in good humor as he received the report, which partially confirms his conclusion that we have now entered a period of negotiation with the Russians. The head of the negotiating team at Helsinki, Ambassador Gerard Smith, later talked to reporters.
My judgment is that this was a serious exercise. The Soviets seemed to be interested in a business-like approach to the problem of getting some control over strategic arms. And if we can continue in the same manner after we start in Vienna on the 16th of April, it seems to me that the prospect is a little bit brighter than it has been in the past, that we can make some progress. But I wouldn't want to strike an overly optimistic note. This is the most complicated problem that I've ever had anything to do with, and we're certainly a long way from home.
Ambassador Smith was asked why the Soviets suddenly seemed so agreeable at Helsinki.
Well, I think just as we have, they have a serious interest in seeing whether or not, by some sort of a consensual arrangement, where one could get a limitation on the strategic arms competition. And this is something that I think they're sensible enough to see could be in their interest as well as in the common interest.
Ambassador Smith indicated he does not now favor a unilateral halt by the United States in perfecting the MIRV, or multiple warhead missile system, but he hinted this is a step the United States might take later. Robert Pierpoint, CBS News, Washington.
The Senate Armed Services Committee created a special 7-member panel today to keep track of the arms negotiations. The committee wants to assess continually the effects of the talks on national security. 5 gunboats whose crews have defied a French arms embargo were reported steaming across the eastern Mediterranean tonight, heading toward the Israeli port of Haifa. If nothing happens, they are expected to reach there sometime tomorrow. Here are some scenes of the 270-ton vessels shot by an amateur cameraman in Cherbourg, France, recently. The ships were among 12 sold by France to Israel. 7 were delivered. But then last January, after the Israeli raid on Lebanon's main airport, former President de Gaulle ordered the arms embargo, and the remaining gunboats were held back. Israel received a refund, and the ships were supposedly then resold to a Norwegian firm for oil exploration. But on Christmas morning, the gunboats slipped out of Cherbourg Harbor for the trip to Israel. The French government says it is still trying to find out what happened. A top government auditor told Congress today that no one man knows the total number of U.S. weapon systems being developed or their costs. Robert Keller, the second-ranking official in the General Accounting Office, cited a new deep-sea submarine rescue craft as an example of how development costs soar. Originally estimated to cost $3 million each, the new rescue craft now is expected to cost $77 million. The Pentagon today announced a draft call for 19,000 men in February. This is 6,500 more than the January call. The Georgia Board of Regents today overrode opposition and by a 9-4 vote approved former Secretary of State Dean Rusk to be professor of law at the University of Georgia. Regent Roy Harris, a leader of the anti-Rusk forces, talked with Foster Davis and other reporters about his opposition.
The controlling issue is we're electing a broken-down politician that has no qualifications for the job for which he's been elected. Now, we never asked. I've been on the board 17 years. We've employed presidents of universities, president of Tech, Georgia State, and practically every institution in the system. We have never yet asked what the political philosophy or any other kind of philosophy of any teacher or any president. But they weren't broken-down politicians. They were professional people.
But regents who voted for Dean Rusk overrode Augusta segregationist Roy Harris and 3 other regents, who based their objections partially on the marriage of Rusk's daughter to a Negro. One yes vote came from Jack Adair of Atlanta.
I didn't consider him as a political figure, even he happens to be one. I considered him on the merits of his qualifications to fill this particular position.
What do you consider his chief qualification?
Well, I think he's had vast experience in serving his country in various capacities, and of course the most prominent position as Secretary of State for 8 years.
Rusk says he'll accept the $45,000 a year appointment, but Governor Lester Maddox, who's opposed Rusk all along, indicated the controversy may just be beginning.
I think the fact that they did not advise the Board of Regents that this man had already been committed to for a job indicated to the responsible officials that they recognized it was a very controversial issue. And they thought they would go ahead and try it anyhow and try to override any opposition that would come up. But I think the opposition is almost in its infancy. There's going to be much more as we see conditions during the next year.
The rural-dominated Georgia legislature will convene next month, and some sources are already predicting a battle over funds for the university system because of the Rusk appointment. Foster Davis, CBS News, Atlanta.
The convicted killer of Dr. Martin Luther King said today that he would rather face death at the hands of other inmates in prison than spend the rest of his life in solitary confinement. James Earl Ray testified in a Nashville, Tennessee court that confinement in a 6-by-9-foot maximum security cell is affecting his mental and physical health. A prison psychiatrist said that permitting Ray to mingle with other prisoners would endanger his life. He said some inmates are willing to take their chances of going down in history books as the killer of Dr. King's killer. Prison officials also said possible co-conspirators might seek his death. Ray has served 9 months of a 99-year sentence.
When you begin to tire out and you're feeling pooped, try the brand new stimulant, Vivarin. Vivarin is new and so effective, too, yet it's gentle to your system. What a lift for you when you face so many of those tiresome chores, when you've had too much of a job outdoors. If at times you feel yuck, here's the stimulant to know. Give yourself a lift with new Vivarin. V-I-V-A-R-I-N. Give yourself a lift with new Vivarin. Vivarin.
Hurry and shave. It's time to open up the shop.
Take a minute.
Electric razor?
Sure. From Williams Electric Shave. Electric Shave makes my whiskers stand up. Lubricates my face. Close, comfortable shave. Feels barber close with Williams Electric Shave.
Barber close?
It does. Why, everybody should look for the big L. First letter and... regular, menthol, and frost lime.
Blabbermouth?
Among the bills signed into law today by President Nixon was one reducing the number of continuous hours that train crews may work. The measure is aimed at eliminating fatigue as a contributing factor in railroad accidents. Such accidents have been increasing at an alarming rate recently. Murray Frompson looked into the situation.
Over the past 5 years, railroad accidents have shot up almost 70%. There are now some 30,000 accidents a year, more than 20 each day. Many are minor. Others have been disastrous. Just this year, 15 U.S. communities have had to be evacuated. In towns like Crate, Nebraska, Knoll, Missouri, Glendora, Mississippi, unsuspecting residents have been asphyxiated, burned out, or chased from their homes after train accidents.
The danger comes from the millions of gallons of chemicals shipped across this country every day to maintain our highly industrialized economy. And the volume is growing. For example, just shipments of anhydrous ammonia used to fertilize crops are up tenfold over the past 15 years. The result is that what were once simple accidents can now turn into major disasters. Critics suggest the railroads are inviting such disasters by failing to maintain their roadbeds properly. Senator Vance Hartke of Indiana.
And if you've gone, as I have gone, down some of the main tracks of some of the big railroads, you can pull the spikes out with your fingers. Some of the ties on which the rails are supposed to be anchored are like driftwood. In fact, some of the rails do not even touch the ties at all. Some of the items which are supposed, the bars, the cross ties which are supposed to hold the rails together, frequently have 1 or 2 bolts missing. In other words, the general condition of the right-of-way, the tracks, and the railroads in the United States of America is deplorable and dangerous.
The railroad industry argues that it is doing what it can to solve the accident problem. It points to experiments like this one in Chicago, a team from the Association of American Railroads causing intentional collisions to test the strength of newly designed tank cars. New brake shoes are checked for their endurance. Some railroads use special cars with electromagnetic equipment to check for fissures or breaks in their tracks. But even railroad spokesmen admit there's a problem trying to do all that should be done. Thomas Goodfellow, the president of the Association of American Railroads.
I don't think any railroad has neglected their maintenance. I think maybe our maintenance hasn't been as good as it might have been if we'd had a little bit more money.
CBS News conducted its own investigation of tracks near Chicago, and in just 3 hours found several examples of poor maintenance that were potential safety hazards. These men were sent out to repair this 5-inch break in a track used by the Indiana Harbor Belt Railroad, but only 20 hours after CBS News spotted it and many trains had passed over it. Less than a mile away, another break in the track, along with many loose bolts. 2 days after CBS News observed this crack on the rail, a group of workers was sent out to fix it. R.J. Hardenberg is the company's maintenance chief.
In your judgment, could a train have been derailed by going over that break?
I don't believe so. A high-speed train possibly might, but this is a slow-speed railroad, and the brake was not excessive, but it's the type of thing, if there's any other particular function in the equipment or anything, there's a possibility of a defect, it could possibly combine to cause a train to derail. But at our speeds, it was certainly not an unsafe factor.
11 railroads passed through Hammond, Indiana, a town of 120,000 people. It's been said Hammond has never had a bank robbery because no one could figure a safe way to get out of town. Rather than maintain their tracks and roadbeds, the railroads have chosen the more economical solution, reducing the speed of their freight trains. 150 trains use the Holman Street intersection every day. Like some other crossings, it has an unaligned track, loose foundations, and bolts either missing or so insecure that they shake every time a train rolls over them. The intersection is a source of considerable friction between the railroads and the mayor of Hammond. What have the railroads done when you've complained and asked them to repair this intersection?
Nothing. I am firmly convinced that sufficient evidence will prove that they have done nothing and they don't intend to do nothing about it.
Like some states, Indiana has a railroad safety code, but it has only one inspector to look after 6,000 miles of track. He checked the intersection at CBS News' request, and we asked him if this situation is unique.
No, I'm sorry to say it's not unique. We've got quite a bit of this throughout the state. Lack of proper maintenance. We call it deferred maintenance.
Well, isn't in fact deferred maintenance just sort of a euphemism, meaning that they're not maintaining their...
That's correct.
With the states unable to enforce safety, the responsibility has been left to the railroads. The government's predicament is that it has authority to establish rates, but few safety regulations for the railroads, the only transportation industry not covered by such rules. But a new bill before Congress would give federal officials the authority to establish a uniform safety code for the railroads and the power to set employment qualifications for the industry. The unions, many states, but particularly the railroads themselves, formerly opposed federal supervision. Now they support it. Secretary of Transportation John Volpe.
We're strongly convinced that neither at the federal level or at the state level is there the authority to do the job in safety in railroads that needs to be done.
The problems are innumerable. Some critics say the pending legislation is not tough enough. But everyone agrees that the new laws would require the railroads to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to produce new equipment and maintain the old. Most of the money would have to come either from higher freight rates or the federal government. It would also take years to agree on a set of new safety standards. For men like the mayor of Hammond, all of this is a step in the right direction. But there are still no guarantees of safety for the thousands of people who live in the shadow of the train. Murray Thompson, CBS News, Hammond, Indiana.
The averages were off on the New York Stock Exchange today. Volume was 12,500,000 shares. The New York index lost 29 cents. The American Exchange Index was down 22 cents.
Behold the jogger. In any weather, he jogs on, as though he'd never heard of colds or flu. That's why we've gone out of our way to remind him, When you catch a cold or flu, do what doctors say to do. Rest in bed, drink plenty of fluids, and take aspirin to relieve the pains and reduce the fever. Bayer is pure aspirin, not just part aspirin. And aspirin is what doctors recommend. Bayer works wonders.
Hi, I'm Marlene Francis, and I'd like to test your judgment. Which of these antacid tablets would you say is stronger? I mean, which do you think settles more of the acid that causes heartburn or indigestion? Well, once again, the biggest is not the best. The smaller Phillips tablet is concentrated, so it's stronger than either of the leading antacid tablets that come in a roll. There is no contest. Phillips tablets are stronger. You like them.
About this time every 10 years, we become a world of decade watchers. Tonight, Eric Severaids scans the past of the 1960s for portents of the 70s. Eric?
These are the few days when everybody in the more cosmic branches of the reading, writing, and presumably thinking trades is busy hashing over the past year or decade and guessing at the coming year or decade. Confusion about the past seems as rampant as uncertainty about the future. The one common element in all the arguments is the elevated emotional temperature. In Washington, the organized historians have been fighting over proposals by some younger colleagues to radicalize the writing and teaching of history. Even the philosophers meeting here in New York have been quarreling with boos and hisses over much the same issue. In the middle of all this, former President Johnson has publicly offered the Johnsonian version of the Johnson years, which raises more questions than it answers, is bound to set off still more controversy, and will probably require, before there is any resolution, the services of the psychologists, assuming they can agree on the reality of the Johnson psyche. The most solid and practical proposals are coming from the scientists meeting in Boston. Since it was modern science and its resulting technology that made such a dangerous mess out of our present physical environment, it would seem to be up to science to show us how to preserve the future. Dr. Walter Orr Roberts, astronomer now concentrating on meteorology, had some specific and drastic things to say about this to the American Association for the Advancement of Science. What our new science of space has got to do now, he said, is to apply itself not to distant bodies, but to this Earth. He is saying, in effect, that Mars is going to be there a long time, but Earth is not going to be here a long time, not as a home for man at any rate, the way we're making it steadily more uninhabitable. With the new space techniques, we can track hurricanes, the shifting ocean currents, the spread of plant diseases, the drift of air pollution. Whole new technologies can emerge to help preserve the right balance between man and nature on this endangered planet. The first step should be to join with the Russians, and they with us, instead of perpetuating the existing competition and duplication. And there have been many signs in the last year that Russian leaders are thinking in the same directions. They live here, too, at the same address, a place that is getting smaller and more dilapidated all the time. Urban renewal is important. Earth renewal is imperative. Harry?
That's the news. This is Harry Reasoner for Walter Cronkite. Good night.